अगर आप एक मल्टी बिलियन डॉलर ई कॉमर्स कंपनी के सीईओ होते तो क्या आप खुद से प्रोडक्ट्स डिलीवर करते? फ्रेंड्स, आप सोच रहे होंगे कि मैं आपसे ये क्यों पूछ रहा हूँ, राइट? वेल, दीपिंदर गोयल जो जोमेटो के फाउंडर एंड सीईओ है, उनके पास इस सवाल का जवाब है। बिकॉज यू विल स्टिल फाइंड हिम डूइंग डिलीवरीज ऑन हिज ओन वंस इन अ वाइल। फ्रेंड्स, ग्लैड टू हैव यू बैक ऑन माई चैनल। आज हम एक बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग और इम्पॉर्टेंट टॉपिक के बारे में बात करेंगे। आई एम श्योर मैनी ऑफ यू हैव हर्ड दैट कस्टमर इज द किंग। बट अगर हम अपने कस्टमर्स को ही खुश नहीं रख सके, देन हाउ विल द बिजनेस ग्रो? सिर्फ ऑफर्स एंड डिस्काउंट से कस्टमर्स को हम खुश नहीं रख सकते। If that would have been the case, then most businesses would have a loyal base. It is important for us to understand how happy or unhappy the customer is with our product or service. But how do we do that? So to know this, let's look at each step of the customer journey and understand that in detail. The first point of experience of the customer is what we would call as discovery. When they actually discover about the product or the service that your company is offering. Post the discovery, they then move to the pre-purchase experience, which is understanding whether the product meets their needs or wants or not, whether that is something they can afford or not. And if it satisfies the criteria, then they end up purchasing it. Now, post-purchase, they actually end up experiencing the product or the service, which is when they understand that whether the product has met what they wanted or not. And then at the end, is whether the customer repeats the same product purchase or not, or the same service purchase or not, or they actually exit from your customer journey. हर step को optimize करना जरूरी है, which is discovery, pre-purchase, purchase, post-purchase, and then repeating it. But the question is, how do you do it? आप ये कैसे कर सकते हैं? Well, there is one answer to it, which is ask the customers themselves. Get customer feedback. Most successful companies have customer centricity as a key part of their DNA. Now, friends, this brings me back to the first question I asked you when we started this video, which is why does Dipinder Goyal still does deliveries? Well, the answer is twofold. One is marketing. Obviously, it makes for good headlines when the CEO of such a large multi-billion dollar company is doing deliveries himself. But number two, which is the most important part, is the raw feedback. जब वो खुद से ग्राउंड में जाते हैं एज एन एजेंट, कस्टमर से इंटरेक्ट करते हैं, उनको एक्चुअली कस्टमर पल्स का आइडिया लगता है, ग्राउंड में क्या हो रहा है उसका आइडिया लगता है, विच यू वुडंट नो जस्ट सिटिंग इन द ऑफिस. फ्रेंड्स, Zomato is not alone in doing this. There are many other large companies such as Uber, Amazon, etc., where the top management is super focused on making sure that they are listening to their customers and then they are acting on it and having a very strong customer orientation as a part of their DNA. As you know by now, I've been an investor for over a decade now, and I've personally observed that there's a difference in performance of companies which keep customer orientation at center of everything that they do. In mid-2020, you might have heard of an acquisition where Byju's acquired White Hat Junior for $300 million. White Hat Junior is an edtech company that teaches coding to school-age children. Well, I'm not privy to what happened post the acquisition, but before the acquisition, I saw firsthand what I would call relentless pursuit towards making sure that their customers were delighted. Customers in their case were primarily the students and the parents who would pay for these courses. Day one of the company being formed, it was a key business pillar for them. Friends, in one of my earlier videos, which I've linked above, I've spoken about the concept of key business pillars. But coming back to our point around customer feedback, let me take an example of another company. You might have heard of a company called Oyo, which is an aggregator of hotels. Now, in the early days, the key management team was required to stay at their hotels when they were traveling for work. This ensured that they first-hand experience what the customer experience would look like and also what their hotel partners are experiencing. To scale from a small company to large, it is very critical for any company to listen to their customers and set in place a mechanism for collecting customers' feedback. तो इस वीडियो में हम डिटेल्स में बात करेंगे what companies like Amazon, White Hat Junior and others have done to set up a system for customer feedback so that you can learn from them. So let's divide the learning into three parts. Let's start with number one, which is making it a priority for you as part of the founding or the top management team to both collect and act on customer feedback. Point number two is developing a system so that you're doing it on a regular basis. And then point number three is defining the metrics that you will use to measure customer experience. So let's dive into each of them in more detail. Let's start with point number one, which is make it a priority. If you are the CEO or the top management team in your company, then getting customer feedback and acting on it has to be top priority for you. Let me give you an example of White Hat Junior, where from day one, they would collect what we call as teacher and student NPS and would report it to the board. अगर CEO importance नहीं देगा तो नीचे की टीम उस पर क्यों importance देगी? If you want the team to give importance to customer feedback and then act on it, then you as the CEO or the top management team have to pay importance to it, because it will only flow from there. White Hat Junior, they would have a 1 hour daily discussion along with the CEO and the rest of the team to understand what new issues came up that day and what the company was doing to solve for that. Core example here of a company, इसके लिए customer centricity is key. It's one of the biggest companies in the world, Amazon. आप crores of customers को service कर रहे हो and yet you're not missing out on their feedback. Friends, the key is because each part of the customer journey that we spoke about, they are collecting feedback on that and then acting on it. Friends, मैं आपसे एक सवाल पूछना चाहता हूँ. If you are the founder or part of the top management team in your company, are you doing enough to collect and act on customer feedback? Or do you think there needs to be done more? Do you think you have a system? So friends, if you already have a system of collecting customer feedback, then that's great. But even if you don't, it's okay. Let's talk about it in more detail. Talk about what we called as point number 2 is developing that system. Then it's very important to have a system where you're collecting customer feedback on a regular basis. आप पूछोगे क्यों? Because this will allow you to make continuous improvements in the business. Otherwise, what might happen is someday you might discover that something big goes wrong and then there's a knee-jerk reaction to solve for that problem. उससे बढ़िया है कि कंटिन्यूसली हमें ये पता चलते रहे कि कहाँ पे हमसे मिस्टेक्स हो रहे हैं एज अ बिजनेस एंड उसको हम कैसे इम्प्रूव कर सके. And this can be done by setting up a system to collect customer feedback. There are 3 parts to this customer feedback system. One, what we call as the outbound feedback loop, which is जब as business आप customers को reach out कर रहे हो to get feedback. Number 2 is inbound feedback loop. जब आपने system setup कर दिया है कि customers can reach out to you if they have a concern. And number 3 is accountability, which is there's someone who's responsible for doing it on a regular basis. तीनों पे detail में बात करते हैं. Let's start with number 1, which is the outbound feedback loop. Now there are 3 things you could do around it. 1, you could do surveys through both email and WhatsApp messages to your customers. Number 2 is actually directly calling them. And number 3 is soliciting feedback at the time of the service itself. Now at White Hat Junior, they had each of these 3 things incorporated. Number 1, they would send out a monthly survey to both their teachers and students and would collect feedback on various aspects of the performance of the platform. Number 2, they would directly call customers every 3 to 4 months, the top management team, to understand what were the issues and why the customers were dropping out for the ones who did, or the ones who did not buy, what were the reasons that they were not buying. Number 3, after every class, they would ask the student to rate the class experience. Now this last point, friends, is especially important in a service context. कि जिस समय सर्विस डिलीवरी हुई है उसी समय फीडबैक ले लिया जाए. Now the second part of our system is the inbound feedback loop. And the reason to set this up is so that the customer, in case they have any issues, can easily reach out to you. How do you set up this inbound feedback loop? Let's start with number 1, which is setting up a text system. यहाँ पे आप एक चैटबॉट अपनी वेबसाइट पे या अपनी ऐप पे सेटअप कर सकते हो so that your customers can record their queries or their feedback on this chatbot, which can immediately come to you. One of the other options which companies like Amazon and Myntra also have for the sellers on their platform is, depending upon how important that query is, it might get escalated to certain team member. Friends, I want to talk about another example here. You see a picture on your screen. This is from my recent visit to a Blue Dart Courier Center. ये उन्होंने बिलिंग काउंटर में लगा के रखा था ताकि अगर आपका कुछ भी खराब एक्सपीरियंस हुआ है ड्यूरिंग द टाइम ऑफ द बिलिंग, देन यू कैन इमीडिएटली गिव फीडबैक टू द कंपनी. This will also ensure that the person who's sitting at the billing counter knows that the company is listening to customers' feedback and he needs to do his job properly. Now, you might ask that do you have the resources to invest in a tech ecosystem? This involves certain investments in technology, which is why even these companies were able to do it only when they reached certain scale. So if today you are a young company or lack resources, you can try alternate ways. Perhaps have an email ID or a WhatsApp number that is exclusively used only for incoming customer feedback. And you can have 1 or 2 team members who are personally responding to each of these queries themselves. Let's talk about the second part of the inbound feedback loop, which is the customer support team. This is basically a team that is being set up to address any incoming issues from your customers. Now, it is very important that you focus on both the hiring, the training, and the monitoring of these teams. There are some standard metrics that most companies use to measure the performance of their customer support team. Number one is the answer rate, that is how many calls are even getting answered. Number two is the time taken to resolve these issues. And number three is the resolution rate, which is how many complaints got resolved after all. फिर से Amazon के बारे में बात करते हैं. जिस स्टैंडर्ड मेट्रिक्स के हमने बारे में बात की, Amazon वो तो कलेक्ट करता ही है, बट उसके साथ साथ वो ये भी देखता है कि जो कस्टमर कंप्लेंट्स आ रहे हैं वो किस कैटेगरीज के लिए आ रहे हैं, किस सेलर्स के लिए आ रहे हैं, किस प्रोडक्ट्स के लिए आ रहे हैं. एंड इससे उनको स्ट्रेटेजिक डिसीजंस लेने में हेल्प होता है कि फॉर एग्जांपल विच कैटेगरीज टू फोकस ऑन और डबल डाउन ऑन, which sellers to perhaps not even have on their platform. Friends, if you had a good experience with any platform for a sustained period of time, it is highly likely कि customer feedback को वो काफी sincerely apply करते हैं. Friends, now let's talk about the third part of the system, which is accountability. आपको एक ऐसे इंडिविजुअल को अपने कंपनी में अपॉइंट करना पड़ेगा जिसकी रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी है कि कस्टमर फीडबैक रेगुलर बेसिस पे लिया जा रहा है एंड द टीम इज एक्टिंग अपॉन इट. अगेन लेट मी गिव यू द एग्जांपल ऑफ व्हाइट हैट जूनियर. They had appointed an individual who was responsible for collecting this feedback and making sure that the entire team was acting upon it. Now, this individual also reported directly to the CEO. So this goes back to my earlier point around how this has to be very critical for the CEO and the top management. Because this person reported directly to the CEO, it also helped him to get his work done by others. एक बार इस सिस्टम को फिर से समराइज कर लेते हैं. 1, which is the outbound feedback loop. 2, which is the inbound feedback loop. And 3 is the accountability. What you do under each of them will depend upon what industry you are in and more importantly what is the size of the business. Friends, आप ये सोच रहे होंगे कि शायद आपका सेटअप अभी उतना बड़ा नहीं है कि आप इन सब सिस्टम्स को इम्प्लीमेंट कर पाए. आपका सोचना गलत नहीं है. The important thing is to not miss out on the system completely, but to actually be creative and think about what you can do, including leveraging your own self. You might have visited restaurants जहाँ पे जो ओनर है वो डायरेक्टली कभी कभार सर्व करते हैं और आपसे फीडबैक लेते हैं about the food and the service. It's a fantastic way to both build relationship with your customers and hear their feedback. If you do not have the resources available today to delegate it to others, collect feedback yourself. And as you grow, you can always delegate it to others. Since हमने जो system के बारे में बात किया, take a call on which elements of the system will make sense for you given your industry and your business size, and implement that system in case you've not done that already. Now friends, setting up a system is one part of it, but the other important part is to also measure, and which is why we initially spoke about that 3-part framework where the third part was around defining metrics. So let's talk about what those metrics could be. Friends, there are some common metrics that are applicable across industries and organizations, but there could also be specific metrics that you might have to put in place depending upon your own context, depending upon your industry, how large your business is, and other factors. So let's talk about that. So एक common metric से चालू करते हैं, which is called NPS, Net Promoter Score. कोई भी कंपनी के प्रोडक्ट और सर्विस को कस्टमर्स तभी रेफर करेंगे when they are really happy with it. And this is what NPS helps us to measure, which is how likely is the customer to refer your product or service to another potential customers. Friends, ये part थोड़ा technical है, so if you want, please use a notebook. The way companies measure the NPS score is by actually running a survey and asking the customers to score them between 0 to 10 on how likely they are to recommend their product or service to another user. Now, depending upon the individual customer scores and aggregating them, we get what is the overall NPS score for that company. There are 3 parts to the scoring. There are users who rate 0 to 6, 7 to 8, and then 9 to 10. The 0 to 6 are referred to as detractors. The 7 to 8 are referred to as passive. And the 9 to 10 are referred to as promoters. The goal for any company is to maximize the top, which is the 9 and 10. It is to minimize the bottom as well, which is the detractors. The detractors are the one who are the least happy with your product and service and are unlikely to refer you to any other customer. At the same time, the 7 or 8 are passive customers. They might be satisfied with your product or service, but they are not that happy. So they will perhaps not end up referring you as much. So the goal for you is to move both the detractors and the passives to the top category, which is the promoters category. These are the ones who are truly happy with your product and the service, and they will actively refer to other users in their network. Now, when you collect NPS score from a number of customers, you need to bifurcate what percent of your customers are in each of these three categories. So let's take an example that you ran an NPS survey and 20% of the respondents in the survey actually were detractors. Let's say another 50% were in the passive category where they voted you 7 to 8. And let's say the remaining 30% are in that top promoter category who rated you 9 to 10. The way you calculate the net promoter score is that you take the percent of users who are in the promoters category, which in this case was 30%, and then you deduct what the users were in the detractors category, which is 20%. So 30% minus 20% gives you 10%. So your net promoter score is actually 10%. Friends, this is an okay score. Your goal is to actually be anywhere between 40 to 50%. If you are at that level, it means you're doing a good job. Now friends, NPS या score calculate करना is necessary but not a sufficient condition. अपने को ये भी समझना होगा कि वो स्कोरिंग क्यों आ रही है. What are the factors behind it? तो फिर से अमेजोन का एग्जाम्पल लेते हैं. स्क्रीन में मैंने अमेजोन की वेबसाइट से जो उनके कस्टमर रिव्यू वाला सेक्शन है उसका एक स्नैपशॉट पोस्ट किया है. इसमें आप देखिए एक ओवरऑल स्कोर है, बट उस ओवरऑल स्कोर के नीचे और भी लेयर्स हैं. ये वो लेयर्स हैं जो डिटरमिन कर रहे हैं कि कस्टमर्स के लिए क्या की एट्रीब्यूट्स है जिसके कारण वो प्रोडक्ट खरीदेंगे, एंड दे आर आस्किंग कस्टमर्स टू रेट ऑन ईच वन ऑफ देम. ना उससे उनको ये पता लगेगा कि which attributes the product is doing well on. This will help influence both the seller and the Amazon and their decision for what to do with the product, but will also help other customers who are coming on the website. Now, as a business, it is important that you define what those metrics are when you are collecting customer feedback. And then it's important that you measure progress on them over time. Friends, the best way to learn is to practice. So everything that we've learned today, let's practice that. I'll ask you 3 questions, and my request is that you reflect and answer them. Number 1, what are the 5 areas in which you've received feedback from your customers over the past 1 month? And amongst these 5, which have you been able to resolve? और ऐसे कौन से हैं जिनको आप resolve नहीं कर पाए हो? Question number 2, in the system that we spoke about today, what do you think is missing in your business? And which aspect of the current system would you like to change? Question number 3, what are those top metrics on which you would like to receive customer feedback on? Friends, please share your answers to these questions in the comment section. Also, if you have any questions about everything that we discussed today, then please share those as well. I will see you soon in my next video. Till then, stay happy and stay healthy.